split screen felt like a boxing ring before the bell, tension crackling through millions of screens across America. On one side, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, her voice measured and clear as she detailed the human cost of a flawed policy. On the other, Donald Trump waved a dismissive hand, his signature smirk twisting into a condescending grin even before her sentence was finished. "Would you just listen to this woman?" he interrupted, his voice a familiar weapon of condescension that immediately put the entire studio on edge. "Always complaining, always criticizing. She doesn't know a thing about real leadership, believe me." The host froze, mouth slightly agape, while a collective gasp rippled through the live studio audience. All eyes snapped to Crockett. Her eyes narrowed, but her posture didn't flinch. She remained still, a statue of cool composure watching a volcano erupt. He thought he could bulldoze her like so many others, but in 60 seconds, she would weaponize his own arrogance and leave, an entire nation speechless. This wasn't just another chaotic cable news segment lost in the 24-hour cycle. This was a primetime special, a live debate on national security policy being broadcast to over 20 million households, with the nation still raw from recent threats and deeply divided on matters of safety and liberty. The topic was weighty, complex, and had real-world consequences for everything from military funding to civil liberties. On one side of the screen was Donald Trump, the embodiment of a certain kind of old-guard political bluster, a man who believed that volume and vitriol could always overpower nuance and truth. He represented a style of politics where the loudest voice in the room wins, facts be damned. Opposite him was Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, a rising force who embodied a new, unapologetic generation of leadership, one forged in the fires of activism, legal battles, and a relentless pursuit of justice. This clash was about more than policy. It was a proxy war for the soul of American public discourse itself. Would substance triumph over spectacle? Would dignity silence disrespect? The entire nation was watching, sensing that this moment would tip the scales. What happened next didn't just change the conversation, it redefined what power looks like when it speaks truth to arrogance. To understand that dismissive wave of the hand, that trademark smirk, you have to understand the man. Donald Trump didn't invent political combat, but he perfected a particularly brutal style of it. One where personal destruction was not a side effect, but the entire point. His entire career, from New York real estate to reality television to the presidency, was built on a simple, ruthless formula. Identify a perceived weakness, attack with maximal cruelty, and dominate the ensuing spectacle. His targets were rarely chosen randomly. They were often women, people of color, or anyone he calculated would be less powerful in the court of public opinion. He mocked a disabled reporter, derided war heroes, and launched racist attacks on political opponents, each time watching his poll numbers tick upward among his base. He operated from a core belief that showmanship always trumps substance, that a loud, memorable insult is more valuable than a quiet, reasoned argument. He was the product of inherited wealth and a lifetime of operating without consequence. AAE's man who believed the rules of decorum and decency were for losers. His was a politics of performative dominance where every interaction was a zero-sum game, and the only goal was to win, no matter the cost to truth or dignity. But this time, he picked a fight with someone who wasn't impressed by his theatrics, someone whose strength was forged in struggle, not inherited through wealth. If Trump's power was inherited and theatrical, Jasmine Crockett's was earned and substantive. Her journey to that debate stage began not in boardrooms or on golf courses, but in the courtrooms of Texas, where she carved her name into the bedrock of justice as a formidable civil rights attorney. She didn't just argue law, she fought for people, families facing housing discrimination, communities battling voter suppression, individuals targeted by a system designed to keep them powerless. Her legal acumen was sharpened against the grindstone of systemic injustice, each case a masterclass in turning precedent into power for those who had been denied it. She knew discrimination not as a political talking point, but as a relentless opponent she faced daily, both for her clients and in her own life as a Black woman, navigating spaces never designed for her success. Her resilience wasn't a personality trait. It was a survival skill, honed in the face of judges who dismissed her, opponents who underestimated her, and a society that consistently demanded she prove her worth. This was a woman who understood that true leadership wasn't about dominating the room, but about elevating the voices too often kept out of it. Her entire career had been a preparation for this exact moment, a lifelong study in how to dismantle arrogance with fact, how to counter cruelty with clarity, and how to answer hollow spectacle with unshakable substance. While Trump built towers, she built cases. While he mastered the art of the deal, she mastered the art of the argument. And that difference was about to go nuclear. Trump, sensing her composure was itself a form of defiance, decided to escalate. The policy discussion was abandoned entirely. "Look at her," he sneered, gesturing vaguely toward her split-screen image. That anger, always so angry, and that tone, so disrespectful. You can't talk like that and expect anyone to listen. He leaned back, smug, expecting the familiar cycle to begin, the flustered rebuttal, the defensive posture, the spectacle he could easily dominate. The host, clearly overwhelmed, stammered uselessly, trying and failing to regain control of the spiraling segment. But Crockett did none of what he expected. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't interrupt. She simply listened, her expression unreadable, her stillness somehow louder than his bluster. This unnerving calm seemed to fuel his frustration, his attacks growing more personal, more unmoored from any semblance of debate. He was publicly unraveling, and she was letting the entire nation watch it happen, giving him all the rope he needed. He waited for her to crack, to finally mirror his rage. Instead, she leaned into her microphone, a faint knowing smile touching her lips. The room fell silent. She was about to speak. A beat of perfect, charged silence hung in the air. Then, Congresswoman Crockett spoke, her voice not raised in anger but lowered in devastating clarity. "You question my tone, Mr. Trump? Let's talk about yours." What followed was not an emotional rebuttal, but a forensic dismantling. Each word, a precise scalpel. "Let's talk about the tone of 6 corporate bankruptcies that left small businesses holding the bag. Let's discuss the tone of countless lawsuits from contractors you refused to pay, ordinary people you stiffed for your own gain." She didn't pause, didn't blink, delivering each point with the calm authority of a prosecutor delivering a closing argument. "Let's examine the tone of a presidency that failed on nearly every major promise, from healthcare to infrastructure, while you obsessed over crowd sizes and personal grievances. Let's analyze the tone of attacking our democracy itself, of inciting an insurrection because you couldn't accept losing." Then she pivoted, her gaze unwavering. "But this isn't really about me, is it? This is a pattern. It's the tone you and your allies use every time a black woman dares to speak with authority you haven't bestowed. You try to ridicule us, to diminish us because our very presence in rooms you've traditionally owned threatens your entire worldview." With every fact, every connection, Trump's smirk dissolved into confusion, then pale shock. He looked down at his desk, at the host anywhere but at the camera capturing his defeat. She concluded, her voice softening yet losing none of its power. "You confuse loudness with strength. But real strength doesn't need to scream. It speaks truth. And it doesn't need your permission to be heard." The studio was dead silent. No one moved. Trump opened his mouth, then closed it, his eyes wide with a stunned, vacant expression. For the first time in years, he had nothing to say. The king of clapbacks had been dethroned. The clip didn't just go viral, it detonated. Within minutes, Crockett clapback wasn't just trending, it was the internet's heartbeat, pulsing across every platform with explosive force. It was sliced into reaction videos, memes, and highlight reels, each frame studied like a sacred text. Celebrities, activists, and everyday people shared it with captions like, "This is how it's done," and "Masterclass." Even conservative commentators, usually locked in partisan defiance, were forced to concede on air that her poise was remarkable, and Trump's attack a strategic error. What unfolded on that screen was more than just a political victory. It was a cultural reckoning. This was a triumph of substance over empty spectacle, of prepared depth over performative shallowness. It was a moment that honored the long, often thankless legacy of Black women in leadership, the thinkers, the organizers, the mothers, the warriors who have been consistently dismissed, underestimated, and spoken over, yet who have always led with unparalleled courage and clarity. Jasmine Crockett stood on the shoulders of that legacy, and in her calm, precise dismantling of arrogance, she proved a universal truth: that dignity is not passive, and respect is not given, but taken, through unwavering principle. Disrespect is a noise that fades. Dignity is an echo that lasts forever.